started. Hello, I want to say welcome everyone to our second webinar in the Future of AI and Custom series entitled Practical Applications of AI and Machine Learning in Customs and Border Agencies. We will also discuss other advanced technologies. My name is Greg Pilkington, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's session. Today, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm the founder and the group admin for the Global Customs and Trade Forum here on LinkedIn. And I have more than 2 decades of experience in developing global customs and trade solutions for various different organizations. The Global Customs and Trade Forum is a platform dedicated to fostering dialogue, collaboration, and innovation in industry. Today's session is the second in our 4-part series where we aim to explore how these advanced technologies, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, distributed ledger technology, and IoT, are shaping the future of customs and border agencies. We refer to this modernization as the Customs 4.0 concept, where technology and human expertise combine to streamline processes, enhance compliance and trade, and improve trade facilitation. In today's webinar, we will hear from the top leaders in the field who are applying these technologies to real-world scenarios, providing valuable insights on implementation and transformation within customs agencies. This session is designed to be interactive, so please feel free to share your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many of those as possible during our moderated Q&A session at the end. So let's kick off with our first speaker. Ana Hinojosa is the CEO of ABH Global, I lost my place, Trade Consulting. Ana's extensive career includes over 34 years of experience in law enforcement, international trade, and policy development, and is a seasoned expert herself in customs and global trade. She's held leadership roles with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the World Customs Organization, where her path and mine briefly crossed in 2016 as she started her role as the Director for Compliance and Facilitation, and I was leaving in April of that year as the Executive Officer for Budget and Strategy. She was also the Executive Director at CBP, where she directed critical trade threat assessments and enforcement programs focusing on illicit trade, forced labor violations, and tariff evasions. All very important topics when we talk about the use and application of advanced technologies. Ana is also the recipient of multiple prestigious awards, including the Service to America Award and the DH Exceptional Service Gold Medal. Thank you for your extra effort. Today, she brings her expertise in regulatory compliance and trade with a deep knowledge of AI and machine learning applications and customs operations. And with that, Ana, the floor is yours.
Thanks for inviting me, Greg, to be here. I'm honored to be part of this conversation and really excited to kind of open the door for the conversation to be had with Solomon and Dominic. You spent a little bit of time, kind of talking about my experience and in preparation for this webinar. I did a little bit of kind of thinking back on my trajectory with customs, and I'll date myself and say that I started with customs in 1987. And just to set the scene, in 1987, in the U.S. Customs Service, we were working with amber screens, those that were coated with, the systems were coated with cobalt, and so the amber screens back then, we weren't even in the harmonized tariff schedule. The volume of trade across the globe was significantly less than what it is today, but it was the beginning of the use of computerization or digitalization to capture the trade transactions. I recall very vividly how people in CBP had to put in the take the paper and convert that into a digital file. Fast forward 3.5 decades later, and certainly the world has changed. Nobody has an amber screen anymore, I hope. And our iPhones process more information than probably all of us combined did back when. But in the world of customs, that too has significantly evolved. Obviously, the need for change has been brought about by the increasing volumes of trade and the need for the customs administrations to handle the multitude of responsibilities and threats and areas that they're continually asked to serve as kind of the guardian of that particular country's borders and their citizens. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is over time, if, you know, my role with the World Customs Organization, I really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to get to learn from each individual country what they're working on, and how we could support them from the perspective of being able to use trade facilitative practices, which, you know, sounds like it sounds like it's, you shouldn't be using risk management if you're trying to facilitate trade, but in fact you really do need to use risk management because the volumes are so big in every country that it's impossible for a human to actually be able to do everything manually on every single transaction. And part of I think what the World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement has been trying to do, um, is to harmonize that development, and harmonize the way, continue to harmonize the evolution of digitalization, the evolution of trade facilitation practices, so that the world can, in a very coordinated way, continue to grow trade, and have that trade continue to be an economic engine for every country. So I'm very excited, like I mentioned, to hear from Solomon and Dominic on when they present their individual topics, because it's areas that I think are going to resonate with a lot of people, are areas that are very important to those that are utilizing it. Some of the I talked about risk management. In the old days, of course, customs administrations used to put in records that would then be how customs would differentiate between importers that had a bad record or importers that didn't have a bad record. And now the volume of data is so big that it's impossible to do that. Yet the requirements across the world for transparency and traceability of supply chains is super important to do a proper risk assessment, especially in countries that have, you know, multiple dimensions of threats: terrorism, drugs, you know, fraud, agriculture, health and safety. It's really important to be able to manage all of that data, and it's impossible to do that manually. So machine learning, artificial intelligence are really a necessity that has come about because of just the volumes of data that are being managed. I think that when you talk about customs administrations, I'll speak to, you know, some of the efforts that the United States has been doing. Not that I work for the United States anymore, but I did. And you know, when you think about a customs administration that processes more than $9 billion worth of goods every single day, and processes more than 1 million passengers every single day, and more than 1 million, you know, small packages every single day, that's a lot of data, that needs to be reviewed, needs to be handled, needs to be inspected to some extent. And that requires some assistance from artificial intelligence to ensure that the haystack gets a little clearer, and some machine learning, so that there is some, um, you know, kind of bring some coherence to some of the things that the humans maybe are not able to process as well as they can with the naked eye, or just being able to intake all of that information. There's a number of amazing private companies out there that are taking that type of data and making sense of the data. You know, one company in particular is really going out there and looking at supply chain data globally, and is able to bring about supply chain transparency to companies, so that even if you as a company don't know who is in your supply chain, these companies can now take data from you know, whether it's open source data, publicly gathered data, or privately gathered data, and make sense of who's doing business with who. This is really important in today's kind of environment of increased regulatory requirements, where people need to be able to respond to due diligence reporting, to concerns with forced labor, to environmental concerns, deforestation concerns. All of that requires companies more and more to have a greater transparency into their supply chains. And without being able to use these tools and these types of technological solutions, it's going to be impossible for the private sector to be able comply with the many regulatory requirements that are coming up, but also for the customs administrations to be able to do the job that they need to do. I know that at the World Customs Organization, there's been a great effort for quite some time to develop the WCO data model, which helps with harmonization of data across the world. And it's really a catalyst for governments that are trying to promote interoperability or connectivity between different governments and being able to communicate better from large markets to other markets. You have to be able to speak the same language, and that isn't about English, it's about technology. And so I'm really excited, as I mentioned, to be part of this webinar and to listen in and hopefully ask some good questions. Thanks for inviting me again, Greg. Sorry if I went over.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Anna. Very helpful to have that perspective from the experience. I know we have a lot of colleagues who are new to this area, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming when we try to get our heads around the size and scope of this problem. So thanks for sharing some of those demographics as well. Next, I'd like to introduce our other two distinguished panelists who bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table. First, we have Solomon Joseph. He's the Senior Product Director at Crimson Logic. And Solomon has been instrumental in deploying digital solutions that enable seamless customs operations across various jurisdictions. And I think, Anna, as you mentioned, he's going to speak to some more in detail on those applications that you also mentioned. And Solomon was with us on our first webinar. And Solomon, could you briefly introduce yourself and share your thoughts on how AI is transforming customs processes? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Greg. I'm really happy to be here. Very happy and excited to be here with my co-speakers, Anna and Dominic. Greg, I'd like to thank you again for inviting me to speak in the series 2, so which means that I did well with the series 1. So let me get started. In my last session, I gave a brief about the various techniques of AI and how it can be applied in the context of customs when it comes to risk assessment. So today I'm going to talk about practical use cases where you can apply AI and ML in the customs risk assessment space. So allow me to share one slide. I want to use the slide as an anchor while I speak. I hope you can see my slide.
Yes.
Right. So these are the various use cases where we have applied AI when it comes to customs risk assessment. Like the first one is the valuation. Valuation is one of the common problems in almost all the countries that we implement our systems. Be it customs duty or GST or VAT, traders tend to underdeclare the value of goods in order to enjoy lower taxes. AI can really help when it comes to this particular use case. We have applied text analytics to crawl open source data, which I think the previous speaker, Anna, also mentioned about it. And this data includes even e-commerce websites where you get information on prices of goods as well as commodities. So we built a price catalog based on all this information that we crawl in the open source. All declarations, customs declarations, goods declarations are then passed through this price catalog to validate the declared value, and then flag out any variances. For example, if there's a variance of 1 standard deviation, then we flag out that particular declaration, that particular item in the declaration. Then the other technique is also to apply predictive analytics for the prediction of fraudulent behavior. And this again is based on the historical and past transactions, as well as the compliance records of the trader. Next is the misclassification and misdeclaration. Under misclassification, traders can willfully classify the goods under a wrong HS code, again, in order to enjoy lower taxes. Under misdeclaration, traders can intentionally provide wrong information or intentionally omit some information. For example, if you're importing luxury watches, maybe you can just declare it as a normal watch. Or even if you're importing, say, 10 items, then you could declare only 9 items, and so on. What we have, how we have handled this use case is to use OCR and NLP, natural language processing, to extract data from supporting documents and try and make sense out of the document, and then compare it with the declaration information, the incoming declaration information. This is very useful when it comes to big invoices. For example, invoices or supporting documents that could be 10 or 20 pages or even 100 pages in certain cases. Then any discrepancy between the data that is extracted and the data that is submitted through customs declaration will be flagged out for customs officers to do more further audit, post-clearance audits, or even to do some intrusive inspections. Another technique that can also be applied is the X-ray image analytics to compare images with reference images of similar products to spot any discrepancies. But however, this has limitations when the cargo is not homogeneous in a container. Okay, in such case, it may not be so reliable. Then next is another key area of concern is smuggling through sea. Out-of-port suspicious activities can also be monitored and flagged much earlier before the actual event occurs. In such cases, we have used vessel risk analytics by applying AI models on the AIS data, AIS feeds that we receive from the transmitter in the vessel itself. Using AI models, we develop indicators for AIS spoofing, switching on and switching off of the AIS, route deviations, and so on, even outside port activities. With all these indicators, then we are able to triangulate and predict any suspicious behavior. Then we have the case of dubious entity identification. This is another use case that is very useful when it comes to fraud detection. Infractions are typically committed by entities, right? Hence, identifying dubious entities can provide customs officers all the necessary information which can help them to be better prepared when it comes to risk assessment, or even when they're conducting physical inspections. Finally, we have anomaly detection. Okay, this use case is again to flag out any anomalies in the transaction. For example, if you're considering declaration data, you could flag out even anomalies like, for example, a particular importer is importing a commodity that is not relevant to his line of business. Or it could be a country of origin that is very unusual for HS code. Or it can be even a container type that is not consistent with the cargo that is being imported, and so on. Right, so this in summary is some of the practical use cases. Greg, I hope I'm not exceeded the time given to me.
No, you're good. Move on to Dominique. Dominique McGuff is the Chief Executive Officer at Customs Plus. Dominique, you've been on the forefront of leveraging this technology as well to enhance customs compliance and efficiency. Could you share your journey and your perspective with us?
Thank you. Again, thanks to the panel and for taking part in it. We are practitioners of AI and machine learning, similar to Solomon, his company. I would want to talk about the value of the AI. Anna made some very valuable points about risk assessments and the customs activities. We're seeing a massive increase in the amount of customs examinations, the number of duty checks. Add to that the sheer volume of increased customs transactions. And to be compliant as an AEO operator, you have to be able to self-audit 5% of your activities. So this added together means the only solution is to utilize AI and machine learning. And I'd add a twist to that, and we call it HI, and that's human intelligence. So whilst AI and machine learning are incredibly valuable and incredibly important in this journey, we can't forget the fact that the intelligence gained by the customs officers, by the customs brokers, plays an incredible role in directing the AI. So that enables the AI to learn dramatically and incredibly quickly, which then allows the efficiencies to increase dramatically. So Solomon explained some of the activities and the use of OCR and AI and how they identify the products. we're involved in the physicality, the sheer weight of declarations. And what I'd like to do is to give you two examples. The first one was a fish importer into the United Kingdom. And when Brexit hit, we had a tsunami, of activity in the United Kingdom. That meant the brokerage, which is unlicensed in the United Kingdom, increased by 10 to 15 fold. So traditionally, we went from 29 million customs declarations pre-Brexit to now anywhere north of 350 million declarations a year in the United Kingdom. Ouch is from Greg's face is where we are. The only way that could be handled was by trying to use technology, some successful, some not successful. Our involvement was a particular importer who had sold the goods on the DDP terms, but the brokers had imported the goods on the FAS terms or ex-works terms. Ultimately, customs were trying to identify who was the paying party for the duties and the VAT on the product that was imported. And that's where we were able to take over 14,000 presented customs declarations, which potentially could be 20 to 35 pages per document, using a mixture, as Solomon said, of AI and OCR and machine learning to identify the declarations that were incorrect, identify the declarations where the Incoterms had not been adhered to, and ultimately recover 1.3 million in customs duties that were outstanding and were paid to the UK Treasury. That could not have been achieved without the ability to receive, extract, validate, and then create data tables that allowed customs to be able to independently audit the findings of the activity. The second example relates predominantly to Irish revenue, where they were looking at a claim from an importer of record over a 3-year period, which equated to 9,500 customs declarations, but 1.5 million individual commodity codes being declared. Purely the weight of that activity was the products had been incorrectly declared as being of non-European origin, when the goods were of European origin and had been imported from the United Kingdom to Ireland, having originally been imported into the United Kingdom, and the duties and taxes being paid in Europe, then being paid in the UK, and ultimately being paid again at the time of import into Ireland. This obviously had a major impact on the profitability of the transactions, and our involvement with Irish Revenue was to be able to clearly identify the audit trail of the original declaration entering the EU with duties and taxes being confirmed, and then the movement of the goods into the United Kingdom with any duties and taxes being confirmed, and then the export into Ireland of the same product that we were then able to, using AI and machine learning, link at a PO level and present it forward. Those are two examples where practication of the AI proved to be able to present revenue for the client, which was in excess of 2.7 million, and revenue for the Customs Authority in the case of the UK, which was 1.4 million in duties. And that is why AI and machine learning are now starting to come into the audit space for the customs authorities and for the importers of record.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Dominique. And now what I'd like to do is let's go back to Anna, now that we've had those two interventions and kind of set the scene. Thanks for that, guys. And look, maybe into some more detail. So my first question to Anna, and I want you other guys to consider it as well, is we have different backgrounds here. So I want to try and turn the diamond, if you will, so we can get some different perspectives. And the first topic is really around what are given everything that we just said, and maybe obvious or not so obvious benefits, and that's a very good point. There's a lot of hype around this right now, right? And some people are getting distracted by all of the cool and weird stuff that generative AI can do. But when I was talking to the community, what I think a lot of people are looking to hear are, again, let's go back to the word practical applications. And in that situation, what are the pressing challenges? So Anna, if you could start us off, like from the customs administration perspective, what are the hurdles, the barriers that we're going to have to kind of work through to move in this direction?
Well, thanks, Greg. And it was great for Solomon and Dominic to kind of set the scene in two different kind of areas. But I think some of the challenges that customs administrations will have is every country has a different legislative framework that calls out what data the customs administration actually has access to. As the world has changed, it's important for the customs administrations, being the kind of the guardians at the border, to have access to a lot more data that maybe is resident in another border agency or in the private sector, that because of their legislative framework, they are not able to get that data. If they can't get the data, that they can't use that data for facilitation or even for risk management purposes. But assuming that they can, legally get access to the data, some of the challenges that I see out there is there are some great tools that are being offered across the world, but the human infrastructure, the preparedness of the humans that are going to be working that with those tools is not necessarily as robust as would be necessary to be able to optimize the use of that technology, so that it actually can give them the biggest benefit possible. I'm sure Solomon can speak a little bit more about how they what steps they maybe take to prepare a country when they're going in to help on that. But in my experience, technology is evolving very quickly, and it's to the benefit of many developing countries that they can leapfrog over technologies that are changing. But in order to effectively do that, the humans that are going to be working with that need to get prepared. And I would say education in IT and in the Internet of Things to prepare the staff early on is important to optimize that.
Administrations, what do you see as being some of the hurdles, the barriers, the challenges to getting to the end game?
Sure. I think you mentioned it. There's a lot of hype around AI, and typically when we even go and propose AI solutions or even implement AI solutions, the expectations that we have to manage with the user is a big challenge. Okay, they expect it to be magic. AI is magic, and so as soon as you implement an AI project, there's a very high expectation on the outcomes. And if, let's say, the outcomes are really not matching the expectation, then again, there's this battle that goes on. So I think this is one of the key challenges that we have seen when we go and implement these solutions, or even get into discussions with the authorities on some of these areas. One way to manage this from our experience is to have the concept of explainable AI. I think that is very important. When you have explainable AI, where the users themselves can understand how the AI models are working and how they are scoring and how they are identifying or detecting any fraud or fraudulent behavior, they will be able to better appreciate and understand. And of course, it also, another key point is also to get them involved in the whole life cycle, in the AI life cycle, right from the data cleansing, data engineering, data analysis, to applying of the models and to the commissioning of the models, where the AI starts then functioning and starts doing the risk assessment. So you have to involve them in the whole of the life cycle process in order to be able to get their buy-in, and in order to be able to get them to understand how it really works behind the curtains.
Yes, absolutely. Dominic, more or less the same question. You're in the same scenario. Anything to add there?
Yeah, the knowledge transfer, just reconfirm. The knowledge transfer is really, really important. And the comment from Solomon about it isn't magic out the box, it's right. People's expectations are that I'll just scan a document and it'll automatically pull all of the fields. That doesn't happen. The requirement for building models, the requirement for testing, the requirement for reliability, and then, as Anna's point mentioned, doing that within the guidelines of data privacy, security of the data, the integration with existing systems, because you can't just pull out all of the historical systems, and then the upskill of the people involved. So, those are key points that at the time of the sale, they may not be mentioned, but they will determine how successful this program actually is. And with all of the clients, it's a real challenge for understanding. I mean, one of the things, we had an exercise with a particular client, and as part of the scope, and we thought we did a very, very detailed scope, was German customs require any invoice that has VAT relating to be held on a server in Germany. Now, this was an American multinational corporation, but ultimately we had to make provision through the SLW or through the discovery sessions that the German data was to be segregated and replicated onto a German server. So it's very much this knowledge transfer and this ability to learn. And that's why I go back to the HI, which will direct the AI. AI and ML are moving dramatically and very, very quickly. And they are getting stronger, they are getting better, they are getting more informative. Anyone who's used ChatGTP or any of those activities will be able to confirm that. But there is going to be some guardrails coming, and those guardrails will be directly relating to who owns the data, the privacy of the data, and where the data is domiciled.
Yeah. That's so I've got more questions, but actually we've got some pretty good questions coming in on the chat. So and one of those kind of you spoke to it, it's a good segue. I'm going to skip the first one, we'll come back to it, but the second question is about the use of the digital product passport. And maybe in some other forums you've heard this maybe mentioned as a digital twin. Any thoughts on the use of a digital passport and how we could use something like that in customs?
Is that to me or to the group?
Everybody, anybody who wants to go first. We'll give everybody a chance to respond.
Yeah, maybe I go first. I think that's a very good, very useful tool. If at all, the challenge is in implementing it. There were quite a few attempts done using even blockchain. There are quite a bit of companies which tried it out, including even things like GSIN, GSIN, Global Shipment Identification Number, and product identification numbers. If it is implemented, yes, that will be a very good solution to a lot of problems that cross-border trade has today, and even it's going to ease customs challenges as well. The challenge is in implementing it and implementing it in all the parts of the world. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Well, I assume, well, the implication is, but let me try to clarify so maybe the other speakers can speak to it as well. You mean things like standardization and harmonization?
Right. Standardization, harmonization, as well as even tagging a unique identifier to the product, so that you have the history of the complete value chain of that product, right from the factory to the consumer.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some amazing progress and work being done in this area. I think key will be that whether governments, or in this case, probably the EU, is serious about forcing implementation of this, because, companies are stretched thin, on many regulatory requirements and natural disasters and other things that are impacting what they need to do. And so I think that the success of a digital product passport is contingent on there being a regulatory driver. And if that regulatory driver doesn't really materialize, companies just are not, it's going to be considered discretional and not so much something that they need to make the effort to put in place. There's a lot of work to be done in gaining the transparency into the supply chain to be able to accurately have that digital passport for that product. And then, later on we'll have to discuss, fraudulent digital passports, but that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, practicalities, Greg, cause a problem. I'll give you again a working example. One of the questions we had from a customer was, can we not just simply have EDI, or can we not just have the importer use an API? That's great in the theory. The practice is, we had an exporter from Myanmar who was dealing with 30 customers in the European Union who had 30 different APIs requirements or formats, and had 30 different EDI formats. And quite frankly, the customer turned around and said, look, I'll send it to print and you guys handle the rest of it, right? So back to Anna's point, that we still don't have the standardization that is required to make this a mandatory activity, and we still haven't got to that commercial requirement where it makes a big difference, because ultimately you will still have a small exporter who may be doing business with 60 customers. Of those 60 customers, some could be once a quarter, some could be once a month, some could be once a week. And the pure volume and cost of moving to an electronic solution prohibit the commercialization of that.
Yes. Cool. Good. All good inputs into digital twinning, the digital product passport. I think at the end of the day, it may come out of something like an AEO program or trusted trader program, where you could have this type of product passport for some of the more well-known shippers, and they're not going to just have self-policing. There will be embedded customs audits, just like there are today, on some of the bigger, especially the technology sector and the pharmaceutical sector. But I can see already in our Air Express model, the concept of a digital twin. The data always has to move with the physical product. One can't leave the other. So I think it's inevitable that we will need to evolve this concept further. And with that, one of the biggest consumers of data, and I think we mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation, is e-commerce. And when we were chatting before the webinar actually started, just the sheer volumes, we're talking about tens, hundreds of millions of shipments that are very low value, but are now overwhelming our colleagues in customs, as well as those traders who are trying to remain compliant. And the question that we have here for the panelists: are there any examples of how AI might be used in these e-commerce contexts? A little bit further, we've touched on some of it already, but yeah, let's try and develop that some more. Who'd like to start us off?
Okay, I was just
all
going to
right.
say, obviously as the tsunami of small packages has hit the customs administrations from around the world, they've had to adapt to dealing with those packages. In the past, it was a grandma sending cookies to their grandchildren in a different country, and so the risk was low. Now there's as those volumes have grown, managing those volumes have required there's some really interesting applications that have been put in place by customs administrations, like the Korean Customs Service had put some combination of risk assessment with artificial intelligence and OCR, machine learning with OCR technology, so that the automated inspection of the packages could do a little bit of rationalization on whether, if it was declared as one pair of shoes, if there was only one pair of shoes in the box, then it would keep the box going. Or if it looked like there were more than one pair of shoes or maybe a gun in there, that machine would kick the box over to the side so that the human could take a look at what was happening there. So there's a number of different applications. This is a very rudimentary explanation of it, but I do think that in the area of risk management and addressing the learning of where some illicit goods have been identified, and getting that reinserted into the system, in the risk management system, I think that absolutely artificial intelligence is playing a big role. There's a lot of, like I mentioned, some really interesting technology solution providers who are utilizing artificial intelligence to bring that transparency to the customs administrations and helping them incorporate that into their risk assessments. Solomon?
Yeah, well said, Anna. I concur with you. It's the tsunami of the small packages, and it is only bound to grow. And previously, customs used to deal with such consignments using express courier or even postal kind of declarations. But now the ball game has changed. There's a tsunami of packages, and I won't be surprised if it surpasses the traditional cargo, at one point in time. So I think, as you said, AI is the solution, because definitely the economic value of these small packages is very low. And for customs to spend so much of resources and their time to handle these small packages is not going to be sustainable. So they have to rely on technology. So AI could be a solution, and a lot of customs are identifying this and trying to deploy AI solutions. The other important area, which I think even the WCO framework on handling e-commerce has put down, is the advanced information. That is something that could really help getting the advanced information even before the cargo is shipped or the cargo comes to the frontier. So that is something that can then be fed into the AI to do an early risk assessment. So that definitely can help in picking those cargo that you really want to do the second level of inspection or second level of risk assessment. Because 99% of your cargo is going to be no risk. Okay, the challenge is to identify that 1%, which could have serious risk, like for example, importing chemicals or importing contrabands or even importing, dual-use goods and so on. So that's the challenge. That is where I think AI can really help. Having sufficient proper models deployed can handle the voluminous data of e-commerce, and deploying the right techniques, okay, will be able to help customs sieve out such kind of suspicious cargo.
Yeah. All good points. Thanks, Solomon. Dominique, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, the other thing, we talk a lot about AI, and we talk about AI as being relating to OCR, or data extraction, intelligent document processing. But the other factor that Anna mentioned earlier is the ability of AI to take image and video analysis. So you add that together to be able to weigh a carton. To use Anna's example of the shoes, we know what the average weight of a pair of sneakers is, or training shoes is, in a box, single box. There's an ability then to identify that anomaly, and then identify from a documentation point of view, but then also identify from an image and video analysis point of view, cross-referenced against the forward information that Solomon mentioned of what the consignment is presented as, and a three-way match will identify and increase the number of anomalies to be identified. We've been working a lot with e-commerce companies where the customs authorities have started to refuse the system-generated invoices. So there's a tradition within the e-commerce world to use a TMS or a TMS type function to create the export invoice of value. But that's not the original invoice, and it's not the value of the invoice. So there's a real issue right now with a number of the customs authorities where they are pushing back on the system-generated invoices and saying they require the original invoice from the exporter as the evidence of goods that the duties and any exceptions to duties, i.e. low value or product is free for quotas, is applicable. And we're seeing that increase quite a bit.
Yeah, that is in the air express industry, something that is frequent, especially in today's e-commerce environment where we see a lot of, well, the drop shipping model, the sell in transit, where you have multiple principal. Some people might call that a successive transaction or chain transaction. Yeah, and it gets quite sophisticated, especially when you try to overlay some of the security requirements for advanced cargo information like ICS2 or ACAS, Predict in the UK, NAIC now in the UAE. I've got a request out now. India wants to implement something similar. The air express industry appreciates those advanced cargo informations because that helps us improve one of our most important metrics is what we call COA, or cleared on arrival. The higher that metric, the easier it is for us to make our delivery guarantees to our customers, because if the goods are cleared when they land, the only thing left is to get it to the front door. So very interesting to see how we can expedite the clearance process by having pre-alert and these kinds of advanced cargo information initiatives around the world. Another question I think is a very good question, and in this same vein, sharing data is a big concern. And obviously, when we talk about commercial invoice data, as well as some of the other attendant documents that go along in this trade transaction, they're pretty sensitive, right? It's a lot of not only personal identifiable information, but also company information, things like prices and what we're charging in the marketplace. How do we protect this data? How do we control the data? Dominique, you started us off a little bit earlier with the German example, but I know the Americans have the same requirement to host anything related to data on U.S. soil as well, and as well as many jurisdictions. So how do we alleviate the concerns while also passing on what needs to be passed on?
Yeah, and it gets back into the traceability, not just of product, but traceability of data. So we're now involved in a transaction from a shipper in let's say Vietnam to an exporter or an importer, sorry, in Germany. We've got two governments involved. We've got a third organization, which is the European Union. And all of them have data requirements. With the European activities, we're covered under GDPR. So the importer in the EU is covered under GDPR rules and regulations. In terms of, you have local taxation rules and regulations, you have local value rules and regulations, because that company has to pay tax or taxes based on its revenues generated in that country. So we end up with 3 sets of data in 3 different data silos, so to speak. The key is obviously how to hold them, and the key is how to agree transfer between the silos. And that's always been the big problem at this moment, is getting the governments to agree what data elements can or should be transferred and what data elements should be in place. The curious thing, Greg, and for the rest of the panel, is that we have a lot of this data today in paper formats that have been produced as PDFs. Someone is actually keying it into an export declaration in, say, Vietnam, and then we have another person who's keying it into an import declaration in Germany. So the data is live, and it's now in 4 different systems. It's the forwarder system at each end, and it's in the government system at the shipper and at the import country and the export country.
It leaves a lot of room for error. It does.
It's huge room for error, but you end up with the data domesticity issue, and that's still not being resolved.
Right. Anna, any thoughts on this one?
So I guess there's different ways of looking at it, in the sense that it's it depends on whether you're talking about the traders moving their own data, to the government and back, or looking at it from the perspective of, some of the technology solution providers who are aggregating data, using the big data that's available in open space to make decisions about what they're doing. And I think to the extent that data analytics is happening on big data that's available, and then that data is being transferred either to a private sector client or a government client, I think that some of the best practices that I've seen is the use of what's been referred to as like federated data, where you're separating what you've looked at. You've made a rational, kind of analysis of that, and then you're sending the analysis, as opposed to sending the big data or sending the big cache of data in back and forth, which I think somewhat safeguards the data. It is still out there, but you don't need to move everything. You only need to move the bits that are required. And I know I'm saying that in a non-techie way, but I think that is really going to be a wave of the future, because there is so much sophistication in the hacking and cyber stalking and cyber incidents, that protection of data is going to be, absolutely, already is a huge requirement. And so reusing data that's available, I think that is another thing that is important for us to talk about different governments. I think Dominic was talking about, even in the use case that he spoke about, where a product went to 3 different governments. It really shouldn't be that it's different transmissions. It really should be a more interoperable reuse of the data that's already in the system. And some of that, I think, is work that's ongoing in different international organizations to try to promote the use of that interoperability and reuse of the data, that will help keep the data accuracy, will limit the exposure to alterations, I guess, and a little bit better protection against some of the cyber threats that are out there. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think that the examples of hub and spoke or federated use of data would be I think a best practice, especially for companies that are using what I would call big data, actually, really taking in mass amount of data, but only sending off the answer as opposed to the full package.
All right. So in the next session, that will be the 3rd webinar in November, we're going to talk a little bit more about blockchain and distributed ledger technology and IoT. But just to wrap this up on the federated data, but 15, Dominic, maybe you remember as well, 15, 20 years ago, we were talking about the SWIFT model, right? I could go to a restaurant in Buenos Aires with my credit card from Germany as an American citizen, and all of those jurisdictions have all of their different requirements, but at the end of the day, the data is protected, right? I'm assured that the restaurateur is not going to get any more or any less than they're owed. The restaurateur doesn't have to worry about me, satisfying the debt, as it were. And I think that's really in the Maersk trade lens example. I think maybe one of the logical errors was thinking that everybody in the trade transaction wanted visibility into the trade transaction. And some people don't want you to know what they're doing. Right, because and for legitimate commercial reasons, right? You don't want to be circumvented and have your buyer going straight to your supplier and leaving you out of the commercial transaction. So, but using federated data, using permissioned blockchain, where we can maybe segregate this data so that only the parties who are authorized or should have access to the specific parts of the data should be allowed that. So look, I want to wrap us up. We're at the bottom of the hour. It's been a fantastic discussion. You're all superstars in global customs and trade. So thanks to Anna and Dominique and Solomon for their valuable insights today. I want to encourage you to sign up for the November 13th session where Frank Hyman, former Dutch Customs with the EU Commission as one of their liaisons, is going to talk about his book that he wrote, Customs, Insights Everywhere, Inside Anywhere, where he talks about the future of customs and advanced technologies in his book, and he's going to share some of his thoughts with us in that webinar series. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. And yes, this will be posted on LinkedIn, so you'll have the replay in the coming days. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.